Welcome to the Mighty Emotions Podcast. I'm your host, Giselle. I'm a certified emotions coach, and I teach you how to respond better to your emotions so you can feel better in your life. My mission is to show you how to work with your emotions to become more emotionally resilient. Your emotions are not designed to overpower you, they're designed to empower you. On this podcast, I share what our emotions are, how to understand them and work with them, and the tools you need to reclaim your power and get unstuck from emotional pain so you can find fulfillment in your life again. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another episode. This episode literally, I had to just pull out the microphone and record it right now because it was pouring out of me as they usually do. And I'm really excited to talk about it with you today because it's something that, again, everything that I come to you and I share is related to my personal journey and what I've been working through or working on. And when I say working on myself, I just wanted to be clear that it's not heavy, right? I don't find working on myself to be this grueling task anymore because I'm not trying to fix myself. I'm just trying to become more of who I am authentically, to embrace myself more authentically. That is the work that I am doing when I am talking about doing the work, right? It's that consciously connecting to myself over and over and that practice of that so that it becomes automatic, that I'm building those neural pathways, if we want to use this language, um, to that just it makes it habitual and instinctive and it returns me to wholeness. That is what my work is about. It is about helping you return to who you are at the core before all of the conditioning and all the things happened. And the conditioning starts really early. I'm watching my toddler start to navigate the world, going to school and interacting with other children and other adults with different, dynamics around her than, when she was just in the bubble of being at home with me and her dad and our cat, because animals impact us as well, okay? But watching the conditioning start to happen as she watches TV, as she watches certain shows, and I'm very intentional about the shows that she watches and the messages within those shows. Um, but it's already happening where her psyche is being impacted by all of this input, and it is beyond my control. And so who she started out as has now been changed and is going to continue to change as it is with all of us. And my job as her mother, I see that as helping her return to who she is beyond all of that. And I can't do that if I'm not doing it for myself. My job is to be a steward, it is to be a guide, it is to practice what I preach. So when I talk about doing the work, I'm talking about getting conscious about the unconscious and the subconscious stuff. And that's really what I want to talk to you about in today's episode. Because one thing I realize is that we are so determined in the personal development space to fix ourselves, to correct ourselves, as though something is wrong with us. And those thoughts of something being wrong with us stems from the feelings of discomfort that we are disconnected from ourselves. And we don't make that connection. So I'm here to let you know that those thoughts of something is wrong with me is stemming from you not being consciously connected to yourself. Now, what do I mean by this? In my work with my clients, I teach them the Mighty Emotions method. And the Mighty Emotions method, if you can go back and listen to some of my earlier episodes where I talked about it, it's really two parts. It's about bringing the body and the mind together because they're supposed to work together. They're designed to work together. And when they work together in harmony, we have the ability to be resilient and meet whatever comes our way with grace. We have the ability to feel really connected to ourselves and to others. And that's what this work is about. When they're disconnected, there's all this dissonance, there's all this discomfort that arises within us to highlight this imbalance, to highlight this disconnect, right? And that's all that it really is, but we don't realize it. And so we set out on a journey because we're so externally focused. We set out on this journey to fix something. And oftentimes, ironically, that is who we see ourselves as being in the world, which is really not aligned necessarily with who we actually are or who we want to be. And the reason for this, the reason that we have these muddy mirrors all around us that distort the way that we see ourselves is because of that input that I was talking about earlier with my daughter. It's about the subconscious messaging. The subconscious mind is carrying all of this data. Everything we see, everything we hear, everything we experience implants data within our subconscious. And that is where our conscious thoughts arise from. And so when we are trying to make changes in our lives, i.e., fix ourselves, we're having all these thoughts that are driving our actions, but we're not pausing to reflect on the source of these thoughts. A really good practice that I want you to do is to ask yourself when you have a thought, where did this thought come from? Because there's not a single thought that you can have that originated from you. I'm going to say that again. There is not a single thought that you can have that originated from you. That thought originated from information that you collected subconsciously through your eyes, through your ears, through your body. That is a matter of what you experienced, what someone told you, what you saw someone do, what you heard someone say. Those thoughts did not originate from you, but you collect this data, and this data is what is used by our conscious mind to create these thoughts. And the thoughts that we agree to are our beliefs, those agreements that we have with these thoughts. I have a thought, I say yes to it, and then that determines my behavior and how I show up in the world and how I interact with the world. So I really want you to practice, where did this thought come from? Where did this thought originate? And do I agree with it? You're allowed to disagree with your thoughts. You're allowed to say, no, I don't agree with that thought, and to choose a different one. And what I love to teach is that when it comes to our thoughts, again, it's about connecting to ourselves and diving into our subconscious and asking that question, where did this thought originate from, is what helps us dive into our subconscious. Because our minds are amazing computers, and any question we input will spit out an answer based on whatever data is there. And we're so unaware consciously of the mass amount of information within our subconscious. We really have to go and search for the file like you do in your Google Drive folder. Like, you have to search for it because there's so many files in there, right? You have to be intentionally looking for a specific answer. You have to be intentionally questioning where you picked up this information that is informing this thought. And I want to talk about this in the context of social media because I think it's so important, is that we don't set filters over our conscious mind. And so we're moving through our lives really unconsciously. And this is where we start to pick up these thoughts that didn't originate from us. So, even an example of social media, what I did recently was, and I'm very intentional about who I follow typically, right? From an intuitive level, but I didn't consciously create filters. So, I decided, you know what? I want to filter out who I'm following on social media. And what I did was I created criteria. And I said, I'm only going to follow accounts that meet these two to three criteria. So, an example of this is, I'm only going to follow accounts that share positive messages, and I'm only going to follow accounts that I would want to share what they're sharing with my friends, right? If this is something that I would send my grandmother, then I'm going to keep following this account. If this is not something I would send my grandmother, then I'm not going to follow it. And that decision, that intention, is going to change the algorithm, your personal algorithm, not even the Instagram or the YouTube or whatever algorithm, your personal algorithm, your reticular activating system. What it's going to filter is within your control when you take ownership of that. So when you say, I'm going to set this criteria, then your mind is filtering everything that comes your way, is going through this conscious filter instead of just being absorbed, right? You can observe without absorbing, but it has to be intentional. That filter, that screening system needs to be what you create. You decide on what is the criteria I'm going to take in and what is the criteria I'm going to reject. And when you do this consciously, you start to absorb the messaging that is going to help you have the thoughts you want to be having and help you shift your perspective and help you have more elevated beliefs and thoughts. Again, your thoughts come from somewhere. So, what is the sources of information and the sources of data and the sources of input that you're seeing around you, that your conversations you're having, music you're listening to, everything? Everything plays a part in what informs our thoughts. If you want to be having different thoughts, you need to realize you need different information. You need new information. And so you being intentional about where you're going to get that information, how you're going to get that information, what are the sources of that information is going to be super important. Super, super important. I hope that this podcast can be a source of fresh perspective, new ideas, new way of seeing things, new thoughts for you. I love getting messages from you guys saying that, when you're struggling with your emotions, you just listen to the podcast just to kind of hear and get your mind to start thinking differently. I love that. That's why I do this. That's why I love this podcast. Right. And feel free to share it with your friends. If this is something you would share with your grandmother, I hope that it's a filter, right? But what I want you to do this week is literally create your criteria. Create that intentional criteria about what you're going to allow yourself to absorb. You can't control everything you're going to observe, but what is the criteria for what you are going to absorb, right? For me, I don't watch the news. I have no idea what's going on in the news in the world. And some people might say this is irresponsible, and I disagree because the news has a very sensationalist way of reporting on things. And they have a way of reporting on things in a here's what you should think about this thing rather than giving me the facts of it. I like to generate the facts rather than having you message to me how I should be thinking about it or reflecting on it. I have very firm mental and emotional boundaries. So it's not that I don't want to be aware of what's happening, but I want to be aware of the facts. I don't want to be aware of the story around the facts. My brain is great at creating stories all on its own. So I don't consume it. I'm very intentional about what media I consume and where I get my information. And there's nothing right or wrong about it. That's just the choice that I've intentionally made because I have that power. And you have that power. We all do. Right? And any stories that have come up as I've been moving through this about what I should or shouldn't do, I go back to where did this thought originate from? Who told me that I have to do this? Who told me that I have to listen to this? I heard somebody say it. Well, if that works for them, great. I disagree. I disagree with the thought. And this builds self trust over time. This builds self worth over time because you're valuing your own opinion more than the external input. And the external input matters as well. But it's about, do we have an internal filter? Do we have an internal screening process? Are we letting everyone in the door? Or are we deciding who gets to come in? Right? Our mind is think of it like a private club. Maybe it's Soho House. There has to be criteria. You have to meet the criteria to get into this club. My mind is very sacred. My spirit is sacred. I cannot control everything, but I can control some things. And those are the things that I put my energy into, and those are the things that I focus on because those are the things that will help me move forward in my life, that will help me enhance my life. And I want that for you as well. So I hope that this has started to get you to kind of look at what you're absorbing and to question your thoughts and to set these internal criteria. Make a checklist about what you will and will not accept. And when those thoughts arise, remember to ask it, where did you come from? Who did I hear you from? Where did this originate from? Because I either heard it, saw it, or experienced it and created a story about what that experience meant. And I can decide to disagree with it in the present moment. And I can decide to not carry it into my future. And I can decide to choose a different thought. And I can only start to choose different thoughts when I'm consuming different information. So, again, where is the inputs? What are the sources of it? And anything that you want to learn, there is a resource. And you have the power to go seek out that resource and just look at different sources and see what resonates and trust the signals of your body and know that all of this is accumulating and accumulating and building your relationship with yourself, your connection to yourself, your self-worth, and that's going to help you move through the world differently. So I know this episode wasn't really about emotions, but it was, right? Because this is part of taking care of ourselves. This is part of nurturing ourselves, is knowing that our thoughts are going to create our feelings are going to create our behaviors, and our emotions are always going to signal for us when we're in alignment and out of alignment. And the one way to try and keep ourselves in a state of alignment intentionally is to create these conscious filters. Right? It's not I'm blocking things out. It's not I'm afraid of consuming things. It's about I am deciding as the sovereign adult that I am what I want to absorb. There's a lot of things I can observe, but I'm going to decide what I absorb from my external world. Okay? So I hope that this was helpful for you. As always, thank you so much for listening. And for those of you who are interested, I have a new audio course in the membership. So head to mightyemotions.com to learn more about my masterclasses, my audio courses. Right now, the course that I've recently released is about healing the narcissistic mother wound. And it's a powerful course. It's super powerful. I've talked about it on previous episodes, but I just wanted to remind you, if you're curious about how you can heal your self-worth issues, how you can heal codependency and insecure attachment, this course is fire. I've literally compiled all of the wisdom, all of the gifts and the tools and the knowledge and the understanding that I've gained from working through this process for myself into this brief audio course. And I'm so excited to bring it to you. So the link will be in the description below. Thank you again for being here for another episode. I'm excited to grow this podcast. So please share it with anyone you think could resonate with it. And I will see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean so much if you could subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends and family, and let me know what you think by going to my Instagram at mighty_emotions and connecting with me and letting me know what you loved about today's episode. It really means a lot that you support this podcast, and I love coming to you each week with a new episode. So be sure to subscribe, let me know what you think, and take care of yourself.